Hello everybody, Brian here with Ready for Retail. It's on to pillar 3, operations. Everything from making to shipping your product, getting it from point A to point B, everything in between. We're gonna take a look at 10 key subject areas and break it down for you. If you haven't already, go out to getreadyforretail.com, print out your free guidebook to follow along. It's gonna ask a couple of prompting questions and take this education a little bit farther. Let's not waste any time. Let's get started. Up first, let's talk about manufacturing partners. A manufacturing partner is the company responsible for producing your product at scale. Whether domestic or international, this partner must be able to deliver consistent quality, meet your volume needs, and stay aligned with your pricing and timeline requirements. A strong manufacturer relationship is probably cornerstone and probably the most vital part of this entire process. Now, it seems somewhat obvious that you would want to have a strong manufacturing partner, but let's talk about some of the reason why it matters. The first one is production readiness. One of the things that you're going to have to do in this journey is to manufacture product at different times, at different scales, as you start small, as you ramp up. This partner has to have a transparent relationship. And one of those things that you have to understand about your manufacturing process is how much time, how much capacity they have. Are they the right partners to scale up with you? Making sure that you have the right contracts in place. It's funny, but a lot of overseas manufacturers, when people start selling on Amazon and they're getting knocked off, they're like, how am I getting knocked off? Well, a lot of times it comes down to your manufacturing partner. Are they the ones actually knocking you off? Are they sharing that information? What kind of contract do you have that keeps them from selling your material to other people? Paying attention to this is very, very vital. It's very important that you have a strong, transparent relationship, strong contracts in place to make sure that when you are in this relationship with them, that they have your best interest in mind, right? Another thing is consistency and quality. This manufacturer has to be able to produce your product time and time again without messing it up, right? You want the same consistency as product number 1 coming off the line and product 100,000. Right? So this transparency in this relationship is vitally important, right? You also want to have scalability, and we're going to talk about this next. The next portion that we're going to talk about is being able to scale. But you need to understand what the capabilities and the capacities of your manufacturer are, right? They might be great for 1 or 2 retailers, but if you're going to launch at, say, a Walmart or a Costco or something super big, you really have to understand, can they grow with you, right? So understanding your future, understanding this roadmap to how to get there is very, very important. Another thing that it does is it helps you with your cost and your efficiency management. If you are dealing with a manufacturer, they're going to be the ones that are going to help you with your raw materials, your pricing, putting everything together, any sort of components, costs may change. You need to know that. And they're going to be the ones that are going to relay that information onto you. So it goes without saying that having a strong manufacturer is vital. It is a make or break. And it is one of those things that it's hard to tell where you're at. A lot of times what we'll do is take someone who's currently working with a manufacturer and possibly go out and look and see if there are other manufacturers that have more scale. You can use it as a contingency plan. You can use it as a scaling plan. Another thing to keep in mind is if you have, like we talked in product 1, the roadmap, if you're going to add lines on, if you're going to add on to your product, even the way it stands, does your manufacturer have the capabilities to grow with you? And to be honest, a lot of times they don't. They might really have something they're very specific on, right? They can only do a certain amount. They can only do a certain size. They might have limitations, and that is fine. Any good manufacturer will know that, and they will work with you to make sure that that scalability, whether it's with them or not, is put in place, right? They're also going to have things like they will own molds, or you will own molds that are inside of there, the recipes, all of that stuff is yours to keep. Make sure that your contracts with them are really, really buttoned up on who owns what, who's responsible. If you start with another manufacturer, make sure that you have things in place that your molds, your recipes, everything goes with that. This is one of those areas that I would highly recommend using someone who's inside of that field, a professional that understands a little bit better. So if you're currently trying to find manufacturing, if you're trying to evaluate or audit your current manufacturing, you might want to look at getting a professional to step in and make sure everything is compliant, everything works. You will have to do factory audits possibly with a retailer, depending on your size, depending on the retailer. You'll need factory IDs and brand IDs. These are all of those things. Factories that you deal with should know that, right? So this is one of those things where you have to be transparent, but you have to ask a lot of questions. If you're uncertain of what those questions are, reach out to a professional, try and find someone to help navigate this. This is one of those areas that you don't want to cut corners. You don't want to skip around steps. You want to make sure that you're buttoned up top to bottom. Manufacturing, your relationship with that manufacturer, hugely vital. Up next, we have scaling production. And what we mean by scaling production, this is your ability to increase your manufacturing output as your demand grows without compromising quality, timelines, or profitability. So this is kind of a second step to the first one. When you talk about scalability, it's one thing. Every step along the way, you're going to have different levels of production. So you might be starting out in a small batch size. You might say produce 100 units, have them shipped to you. You sell them on your website. You're selling them at a flea market or a First Friday event where you're managing everything yourself and everything is done in small batch sizes. Once you start to scale up, and let's say we start selling on Amazon, and now you've got more of a replenishment, more of a feel for something, and maybe you're selling 1,000 a month, right? If your manufacturer could produce 1,000 a month, that is great. But if they can't, you have to be able to scale up, and that might mean working with other manufacturers. The biggest component to scaling is understanding when you need to scale, to what size you need to scale, and then also understanding the capabilities that your manufacturer has. So if your manufacturer can only produce 1,000 a month and you're running on Amazon and you've got a great business and everything's running fine, but you're looking to get into retail, and let's say you want to launch at Target. Well, if you start working with Target and Target comes across and says, yeah, I would love to do business with you, but I'm going to need 10,000 a month. That is not the time to go back to your manufacturer and say, what do we do now? Understanding that roadmap and understanding those key points of timing and capacity are vitally important. Now, your current manufacturer might be able to produce 5,000. That's something that you can negotiate with a retailer to say, hey, I would feel more comfortable if we kept our store count in line with my manufacturing capabilities for now. And once we scale and once we've proven that this item belongs in Target, we can then go to 2,000 stores or 3,000 stores. We can scale up from there. And then you can use that time to find an appropriate scaling partner, right? A lot of manufacturers will be able to go out and find capacity, like they will actually do the legwork for you. Some might not. But this is one of those things like having finances ready to go beforehand. When you start thinking about retail, you want to really start knowing and understanding how you're going to scale. You don't want to wait until you have a PO. You don't want to wait till you have commitment from a buyer. That's the wrong time to do it. You want to have all of that in place beforehand because that's part of the negotiation with the buyer on how you're going to supply them. So scalability, the ability to ramp up, to build more production, to get more product through the system is vitally important. Now let's talk about lead time. Lead time refers to the total number of days or weeks it takes from the moment a purchase order is placed with your manufacturer to the moment the finished goods are delivered. I'm actually going to take this a little bit farther. Lead time is going to come up in every aspect that you have inside of this journey. It is something that is vitally important. I talk to a lot of clients right out of the bat, and of course, everyone wants to know how soon can I be in retail? If I get if I get a meeting with the buyer on January 1st, am I going to be in stores February, March, April? That lead time's a lot longer than people think it is. When you sit down with someone on the retail side, it could take a year, it could take 18 months, it could take a long time. One of the reasons why this takes so long to put, besides having all of the stores that need to get, put onto, like if you walk into Walmart, they're not setting an entire Walmart in one day, right? So an average retailer will set a new set once a year, and they go through a line review process, which we're going to get into later. Not in this one, but later in general. The line review process is pulled out so far ahead that all of these lead time concerns are taken care of. But what you have to understand from a lead time perspective, the way the buyer wants to understand it is, if I tell you today that I need product, how long will it take you to get the product sitting in front of me? Okay. Now, from a PO, that's a different conversation, because they will place a PO and they'll expect that product to already be in the US or sitting in a warehouse ready to go. So that lead time from when they place that PO to when it could ship could be 3 days. It could be very quick. But you also have the lead time to get into a distribution center. That might take 2 weeks. That is what the retailer is concerned about. When I place a PO, how fast can you get it to me? But what happens is you have to back your lead time up even farther. If you're producing your product and it takes a month to make the product, and it's being made overseas and it takes a month to get here, that means that you've got 2 months of lead time before it's sitting inside of your warehouse. This is where forecasting becomes so important. If you're not forecast properly and you miss that window, all of a sudden that retailer is expecting you to be able to turn around product in 2 weeks. That's what their lead time states. Well, they place that PO and you haven't gotten your product in here, and all of a sudden you're at a deficit, right? You're not shipping your product on time. You're going to miss windows. There's going to be out of stocks, and there's a lot of bad things that happen with that. So lead time is a word that you will hear constantly. You'll hear it from demand planning. You'll hear it from your manufacturing. You're going to hear it from sales. You're going to hear it from everybody on the planet wants to know lead time. They all mean different times, but they're all stating the same thing. What I mean by that is they want to know, how much time do you need to get this job done, right? So lead time for a retailer is, I place a PO, how soon can you get it to me? Great. From a manufacturer's perspective, it's like, when you place that order, how long till you get it sitting in your DC? What is the lead time of that? It might be 2 months. It might be 3 months. If you're a US provider and it's something easy to make, it might be a week that they can turn around. Once you put all of this into a forecast, you're able to look at when you need product and back that all the way up. Typically, that is not a very quick timeline. Usually from the time someone says, hey, I'm going to put you in a store, to sitting on the shelves is going to be 4 to 6 months. You'll have testing in there. You have new item setups. You have vendor agreements that you have to sign. So that process doesn't take a short amount of time. But understanding all the different lead times inside of that is vitally important. And being very transparent with your retailer about what your production time lead times look like, what your shipping lead times look like, understanding that entire flow and being very consistent, being very transparent. This helps mitigate risk. Everything on top of this is vitally important to this flow of inventory. So lead times, every step of the way, know what they are, have them written down, make sure that you're holding people accountable to it. Now let's talk about quality control. Quality control, or sometimes you'll hear people say QC, is a system that you put in place to ensure your product consistently meets design specifications, performance standards, and the retailer's expectations. This is one of those things that you would think and you'd automatically assume that a manufacturer has for you, but that's not always the case. Some manufacturers have very specific quality control systems in place, you will want to familiarize yourself with those practices. So if you think about production from a timeline of product coming into the manufacturing facility, whether it's components or ingredients or whatever it is, to every step along the way till the finished product is leaving, there should be quality places and controls put in at multiple steps. And a lot of times what that means is, let's say there's a 5-stage process to making your product where it's ingredients come in, then it is assembled, then it is put together with another piece. Most of those times, what will end up happening is with a quality control, you will have someone that will take a product off the line at random, take it to a standard spec, and make sure that everything is aligned. And you want to make sure that this process is in place so that you have consistent product, you have good quality. This builds the retailer trust. It builds the trust of your customer because they know what you're getting, which of course is your brand's reputation. So at the end of the day, making sure that this system is in place to make sure any product is being appropriately checked. You can also use industry standards or best practices. Every industry is going to be different, right? And so understand what the best practices inside of your industry is vitally important, right? I've seen too many people just take this one for granted, and then something breaks later on. And when they go back to look at it, there's no process in place of them to identify how long it's been going on. Is it just a small batch, or is it everything has come off the line in the last month? You want to be able to track, right? So a lot of times when you do that quality check where something comes off, well, we know at that moment in time that everything was fine. Let's say the next one comes off and it doesn't work. Well, a proper procedure will say that everything from the good check to the bad check needs to be checked again. And they might take that entire batch, say there was 10 pallets that came off, they're gonna take those 10 pallets and they're gonna check 3 from each. And best case scenario, all 3 are fine. It was just a random whatever. They're gonna keep checking, but they're gonna check more often to make sure that it was a one-off and not a big issue. But if they go out and they find, 3 of the 6 that they are looking at are bad, well, now you have a bigger problem and it's time to stop and figure out what's going wrong, and then they can address it. These will keep major issues from happening at retail or with your customer and keep it inside of the factory. And that's really what we want from a quality control, is to make sure that if something does go wrong, it is caught there before the product goes out, than caught when everything is sitting in a customer's hand and nothing's working. So make sure that your manufacturing facility has one, be active in it, understand it, ask for updates, make sure that everything is in place. But that quality control is something that is truly vital to making sure that you have a consistent product. Contingency planning. Contingency planning involves preparing for disruptions in your supply chain by securing backup manufacturers, alternative suppliers, and emergency protocol to maintain your operations. So we've talked about the manufacturer's relationship. We've talked a little bit about quality control and all the things, but what happens when something really goes wrong? Now, this is what we mean when we're talking about this situation: is something goes wrong, how do you mitigate that risk? There's a couple different ways to do it, and we alluded to some of them, but here's the number one way to mitigate some of that risk, and it's called safety stock. It's just carrying more supply than you need. And what I mean by that is, if you have a very consistent product that you're putting out 1,000 units every single month, if everything's operating smoothly, it's great from a cash flow perspective to have 1,000 come in and 1,000 go out, and 1,000 come in and 1,000 go out. But let's say something happens. We've got geopolitical things that cause a tariff. We've got manufacturing production that fails. A system breaks down, a plant breaks down or shuts down for some unseen reason. A container falls off a boat in the middle of the ocean. The number one way to mitigate that risk is to carry more supply than needed. So if you have 1,000 coming in every month and 1,000 leaving every month, maybe you carry 1,000 in your distribution center as backup. In case there is something that goes wrong, you know that you have a month's worth of inventory that is sitting there. It could still be in the pipeline, right? But instead of carrying 1,000 units every month at your distribution center, you're carrying 2,000. It's the easiest fundamental way. And you're going to want to figure this out from your production, from your sales force, from the retailer itself, what those expectations are. Depending on the flow, it might be a week's worth, it might be 2 months worth. I've had people bring in 6 months of inventory to start a new program just to make sure that if anything went wrong, they wouldn't miss anything. But having this additional product is always good. The second way to make sure that you can mitigate this risk is by having an alternative manufacturer, a backup program. A lot of times what will happen is as you're scaling, you might go out and look at other facilities that have capabilities in case if you hit capacity, your current manufacturer, you can push it over to someone else, right? If that's the case, if something shuts down, then you should be able to move production to another manufacturer. The ones who do this the best are, and we're going to go all the way back to your manufacturing partner. Your manufacturing partner should understand what it takes to make that product, and they should be able to tell you, at least with a little bit of confidence, that there are some other manufacturers that they work with that they can help in case something goes wrong to mitigate that risk. So look to your manufacturer and say, okay, if something goes wrong, what is the plan to keep us moving product? And maybe they'll hold safety stock, right? I've seen that happen before where they're like, instead of you paying for 3PL to hold your product or hold that safety stock, they'll hold safety stock inside of their facility. If something happens, they'll just move over and start shipping that to keep the pipeline going. The only problem with that is it won't help with anything past that point from shipping or other things that would happen inside the supply chain that might mess that up. But those are the things that you want to have. You want to have a plan for the rainy day scenario. My number one plan for the rainy day scenario is always going to be safety stock held inside a facility that you could pull from at any given point in time to help with any hiccups or bubbles, because they will happen. Big ones would be if your facility has some major catastrophe, how do you move that production to another facility? Now let's talk about third-party logistics providers, or you'll hear the term 3PL thrown around a lot. I will do it myself, but a third-party logistics provider is it a company that manages your inventory storage, your order fulfillment, and shipping on your behalf instead of handling the logistics internally. So it's basically outsourcing storage and shipping and order fulfillment. This is one of those areas that is huge when you think about making a transition from selling online, selling on Amazon, selling internally, maybe where you're shipping product yourself, to moving to shipping to retailers, because this whole process is going to change. A lot of times inside of Amazon, you can ship your product to their DCs and you just ship it in a fulfillment of they need 100 every month, or they're going to send an order. You're just going to fill that up in hopes of supporting the online business. The way the orders come across, everything is going to be vastly different. And that's why it's very important to have a 3PL provider that can do all of this for you, especially when you're going to scale. So what needs to happen for that 3PL is, one, they have to be able to take your product in. Is it coming in containers? Is it coming in semi-trucks? Is it coming on a UPS truck? Whatever it is, they have to be able to take that inventory into their facility. They also have to be able to store an appropriate amount of that product. So if you're moving 1,000 units a month and they've got to be able to store 1,000 units a month, is that a bin? Is that a pallet position? How many pallets do you need? How many, a lot of that comes into consideration when you're talking about your 3PL. The other thing that they're going to have to be able to do is take orders in. And we're going to talk about EDI next, but they're going to have to be able to take orders in, process those orders, assemble those orders. They're going to have to be able to print labels and label the product correctly for the retailers. And then they have to be able to get that product out. They're either going to ship it out themselves. They might have docks where retailers are coming to load product or pick up product. They might have to have people come and pick it up from UPS or FedEx, right? There's a lot of different ways this product is going to leave, and we're going to talk about some of those scenarios later. But your 3PL is just as important in what their capabilities and what their expectations are and what their cost is to your manufacturer. They're the ones that are going to take that product and move it to the retailers. And this is one of those areas that manufacturing and Amazon are not very different. You're making product, you have to be able to forecast, you have to be able to scale to do a retailer. This is where selling on Amazon and selling to a retailer become very different. The way that orders are managed, the way that inventory is stored, the way that inventory is shipped is very different than your standard selling on Amazon or selling on your website. So you're always going to want to, especially when you're talking about what retailers you're going to want to supply in the future, be very transparent with your 3PL. Make sure that they either have a relationship with that retailer already or they understand the process, right? I'm not saying that they have to have it completely down. If it was me, if I was putting product into Walmart, I would want to work with a 3PL that already was doing that so that they had cut their teeth. They knew how to deal with them. They knew what it looked like. They knew what their labeling requirements are. They're all up to speed. So if you have a path or runway, if you have a channel strategy where you're like, I'm going after these retailers, it's always beneficial in that moment when you're talking to 3PL to share that information. Here are the retailers that I want to go after. Do you do business with them currently? Do you have a system in place? Can you handle EDI? What are the capabilities that you have? And if they're like, no, we've never dealt with Walmart, you might want to move on down the road, right? Because some of this really matters on how your efficiency, your scalability, making sure that you're compliant with what the retailer needs. And then another thing to keep in mind is your geography, right? Some 3PLs might have 5 distribution centers all across the country, which would change their shipping lanes, right? So they've got one in, the West Coast and the East Coast and Central and North. They might be able to go to multiple distribution centers and save, and there's efficiencies around those lanes that they're paying for. Whereas if you have a distribution center that say is in Seattle, Washington, if you're working with a national retailer, and we're going to get into collect versus prepaid, what will end up happening is either you're responsible for shipping it all the way to Florida's DC, right? Or they're going to have to pick up and put it inside of their system, right? All just things that you want to know. The most important one for me as we talk about getting ready for retail, if you have a retailer that you are targeting, you want to make sure that your 3PL is aware of it, find out if they have a history and that they can deal with that retailer and what their compliance or capabilities are. So up next, we're going to talk about the shipping process. Now, this is one of those things that is encompassing a lot, but it's not one thing inside of it. We could say, well, it's about, orders or it's about labels, but your shipping process really is a step-by-step system used to prepare, to pack, to label, to deliver orders to a retailer or distribution center. It includes everything from case pack configuration to pallet specs to label placement to freight coordination. It clearly defines the shipping process to ensure that your product arrives on time, in spec, and without issues. So this goes along the lines of the quality assurance. This is getting into the details. We're going to talk later. I told you that I would work in the P&L, item level P&L into every single thing that I do. That is going to come later. But this is the amount of detail that it really takes to keep your product moving consistently and without hiccups, right? It helps you with retailer compliance from labeling. It helps with efficiencies and minimizes delays and rejections. It's also just professional. But at the end of the day, what you want is the same amount of diligence that is put into a spec form, which is this product needs to be handled this way, built this way with these materials. The same thing should be said by your quality assurance and your quality control, is to making sure that here's where the product goes, here's where it comes off, here's where it's getting tested. If something's wrong, here's a protocol that's put in place to take care of it. The same thing should be said with your shipping process. You should understand, how are my orders coming in? When do they need to be accepted? What is the turnaround time? What is the process that my 3PL takes from taking it to storage to putting on a pallet? Making sure that the labels are correct. Labeling is one of those things that people will get screwed up. And trust me, if a label's done incorrectly, it will get tossed out, moved, turned around, lost quicker than anything you can think of, right? So having that process in place helps for multiple reasons. The same way that you want a consistent product coming off the end of your line so that your customer's happy, your shipping process needs to be the exact same too. Partially because a lot of these people are going to have people coming in and out. There are different people hired. They're going to lose some people. Having a really strong process makes sure that during that time that it's spent inside of your shipping, your 3PL, everything is running smoothly. Even if someone has to come in and do a job that they've never done, that process is in place to make sure that it is done quickly and efficiency, and all the boxes are checked so that the retailer can take that product on and there's no hiccups or no issues. I would have it written down. I would have it very transparent with my 3PL. I would make sure that they provided that to me. And the other thing that will happen is you will get graded on things like OTIF, on time in full. And when you see those scores, if they start to drop, well, then you can go back to that process and understand, okay, where are we falling down? You can go sit with your 3PL and say, we've, short shipped the last 5. Is it because we don't have enough product? We can increase the product. Is it because we're getting hung up somewhere? Is something being done that is not on our list, or something not being done? So it gives you a reference point to always start with to help problem solve and troubleshoot. So make sure that you have a very strong supply chain and shipping process in place so that you know what's going on at every point. And then if something breaks, it helps you troubleshoot a lot quicker. On to electronic data interchange, also known as EDI. You've probably heard the term EDI a lot, so let's talk about it. EDI is a digital communication system used to automatically exchange business documents such as purchase orders, invoices, shipping notices, and inventory updates between your business and your retail partner. So this is one of those things that I think can be a little bit scary for people, but know this, there are really good providers out there, and it goes back to understanding all of these processes and the way that you lay down this foundation. For example, we talked about 3PL. If I was to get a 3PL and my goal was to ship to Walmart, there are 2 things that I need to make sure of. 1, that they have some Walmart experience, and 2, that they have EDI capabilities. Okay. Those are just some of the fundamental questions that you have to make sure. Now, if they're dealing with Walmart, then they have EDI capabilities. All EDI is, in the old days, and actually I'm old enough that I've actually done this, you could walk into a grocery store with a sheet and sell pallets, and they would write down, I'd like 4 pallets of kitty litter. You would take that back and you would enter it into a system. It would go off somewhere and it would move through the system from there. That is no longer the case. Most of the major retailers use EDI, and EDI is just a way of electronically connecting their order system, their inventory, to your 3PL, where you're carrying your costs and everything, so that the 2 of them are touching without humans interacting too much. And so what will end up happening is Walmart decides that they're ready for a truckload of your product. They simply need to put that order into EDI. EDI will then notify the manufacturer. So I would go in and say, yep, we're good to go. And then that would move on to your 3PL. They would see that come across electronically, and they would take your shipping process and then put that into place. And they would print off the labels. They would put it on the pallet. They would slap a sticker on it. and then they would ship out accordingly from there. So EDI is not difficult. It's not hard to understand. It's simply the connection, but it is absolutely crucial. And I've seen people get hooked up on this. My recommendation for those of you who are getting ready to journey into retail is to have the conversation with an EDI provider before, just so that you have some of the groundwork laid. You could wait till after you had a commitment. I don't like to play that game. I don't like to be behind at all. So highly recommend, like, all those things. It's like having a checkbox. Contact EDI, make sure that you've started the process. You don't need to have it up and running. You don't need to, it's like liability insurance until it's truly needed in your shipping product. Just be ready for it. Go out, have the conversations, fill out applications, have everything kind of sitting there ready to go. That way, when you finally do get the matrix or you get some sort of commitment from a retailer, you're turning switches on. You're not necessarily starting from scratch. But EDI is one of those things that you will need to do business with most major retailers, if not all major retailers. So it's one of those things that you can go out and do a little bit of research. There's a lot. I use SPS Commerce on a day-to-day. All of my clients use them. Really easy to work with. Once everything is set up, they'll send dummy POs across. They'll make sure that connection is working and everything's fine. You're really just following their lead. And then from that point on, you'll have a pretty minimal interaction with EDI on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of running behind the scenes, but you're going to need it. Up next, we're going to talk about shipping cost at different volumes. We're getting to that item level P&L stuff that will come up every single time with me. You guys know what's going to happen. So here's the start of it. You're going to expect to have different efficiencies based off the size increases or decreases from your facility. Understanding that is going to help you calculate your costs down to the item level where we expect you to be. Okay. So an example of that is if your manufacturer can make 100 units and your cost for that 100 units is $10 a unit, great. What about 1,000 units? What about 100,000 units? What about 1,000,000 units? There are usually breaks inside of those areas as you increase volume that creates efficiencies that will allow the cost per unit to come down. You want to make sure that you're working with every single step along the way, starting with your manufacturer to say, okay, I'm going to go into retail. I'm assuming that I'm going to go from 100 units to 1,000 units. What is the different price breaks there? 1,000 to 10,000 to 5,000, whatever those price breaks are. Have a really good conversation to understand that, because that's going to help you build your cost to the retailer. So once you start getting into the negotiations with the retailer and they're saying, hey, I think I'll probably do a test with you and I'll put you into 200 stores. Great. You're going to have a conversation around building a forecast and working with your buyer to build that forecast. They're going to look at like items. They're going to look at how their product is moving and say, you know what, I think you're going to do about a unit per store per week. Great. That means that if you have 200 stores, that's 200 units per week that you'll be shipping. Now you can go to your manufacturer and say, hey, this is great. How much is this? There might be cost savings to what you're currently doing. But imagine if you were to do 1,000, you might save $1. That information is something that you can use to negotiate with your buyer and say, great, 200 stores is great. Just so you know, that puts our forecasted volume at 200. If I go over 1,000, I can take $1 off this based off of efficiencies. And that might be enough for them to say, you know what, I'll put you in 1,000 stores. Let's see what happens. Or don't need it, right? But you understanding where those breaks are is really important to negotiating and understanding how you are going to price your unit level to the retailer. Another way of thinking about it this way too is maybe that test for 200, you're going to sell it at $5 to your retailer. Well, you know that if you can increase, you can gain that dollar, maybe use that dollar elsewhere. Maybe you were really thin on your profit line, but you're willing to take that thin margin to be able to expand and make sure that you can improve the product or to just get your foot in the door. Once it expands, once you know what that dollars per break is from a size perspective, you'll be able to manage your business a lot better. So whereas we started with a product where sometimes that profit will shrink if you're not doing things correctly, this is one of those areas that as volume breaks happen, you could start to expand your profit. But you need to understand where those breaks are, work with your manufacturer, make sure that you're not pushing them too far to where they're signing up for things that they can't deliver on. But there should always be efficiencies as you scale up. And one of those efficiencies should be from a manufacturer's perspective. Understanding that will help you build your model out and say, you know what, year one, I might not be making a whole lot of money. I might be just scooting by. But if year two, I can expand from 200 stores to 1,000 stores, not only am I pushing more product through the system, but it's going through at less cost to me. Therefore, I become more profitable. But having the vision and the eyes on that helps us right at that item level P&L to build scale and growth both up and down appropriately to make sure that we're still profitable. Last but not least, shipping cost to deliver to retail. You knew it was going to happen. It was going to come down to the item level P&L sooner or later, but the shipping cost to your retailer includes all logistic expenses required to move your product from the point of manufacturing to the retailer's warehouse. This is one of those things I see people who've been in the business for a long time screw this up. We've got surcharges, we've got cross-docking fees, we've got everything inside of it, so much so that I actually printed one out that is an actual real-time expense. I think that everyone does a pretty good job of understanding their landed costs, which means if a manufacturer makes your product, they ship it from wherever they are to your 3PL. I think people do a pretty good job at that because it's usually consistent. There's not a lot of things that will get that off. From the second it hits your 3PL on, I think people don't do a very good job of taking that and blowing it down to the item level to see whether or not it pays off. This is an actual sheet right here, and I can read it to you of what a 3PL might have on their stuff. You've got inbound. Inbound hourly is $45. De-vanning, which is taking stuff off of a sealed container for a 20-foot container is $300. A 40-foot container, $500. A 53-foot is $650. You've got orders from direct to customers, orders, units, labor. You've got orders B2B. So if you're shipping to a retailer, every order is $6. You have a $12 unit fee, a line fee of $210. You've got outbound labeling fees of 15 cents. You've got storage fees. A large bin is $15 a month. Medium bin is $8 a month. A pallet is $25 a month. You've got labor at $55. Return orders of $3. You get the picture. If you don't properly take a look at what all of the shipping is inside of your unit level P&L, things can add up quickly, right? Another thing to keep in mind, EDI subscriptions. EDI is not free, right? If you use a EDI provider, they're going to have probably a one-time startup fee and then a monthly fee to keep that going. All of those little fees, the little $2 for this, $5 for this, $18 to store, those all add up. If you're not keeping account of it and making sure that that's inside of your cost somewhere, it is going to bite you in the butt. Another big thing that people want to talk about is collect versus prepaid. Okay. And this is a huge difference. Collect, just so you know, collect is when the retailer pays for the shipping. That means that Target or Walmart or Costco is actually going to pay to come pick up the product from your facility and take it, right? So I might have a $5 cost, and they come, they pick it up and they eat all of that, the charges for shipping. Prepaid is when you are paying to ship that product to their facility. This is where it gets tricky. If your facility is in Seattle and you start out with Walmart and you're only in the Seattle area and you're like, oh, my shipping's, comes out to be 50 cents a unit. It's not a big deal. So you give that cost to Walmart and all of a sudden they're like, we love your product. We're going to take it nationwide. Well, that shipping cost to go from that little shipment to a Seattle DC to all the DCs is going to go up a lot. And so what will end up happening is all these different lanes and lines and distances and things can come and bite you in the butt when you're not prepared for it, right? It might mean that you need to go to that retailer and state, hey, we were built off of a prepaid agreement where I was only shipping so far. For me to ship nationwide, I'm going to have to take a price increase of 15 cents or whatever it may be. But understanding the difference between prepaid and collect and where you are with that retailer and how you're setting yourself up, understanding all of the charges that are inside of a 3PL, understanding your subscriptions to EDI, all of that has to be accounted for before you can ever give a price to a retailer. And I think some people skip past this and they're like, well, I can get my product delivered for $3 to the US, so I'll sell it to my retailer for $5 and I'm gonna make $2. And then there might be some things in there. And then all of these things and all of the deliveries, and you decide to set yourself up prepay. Now you're paying for shipping to their facilities and it just eats away and it eats away and it eats away. So once again, part of your item level P&L is containing the shipping, not just from your manufacturer to your facility, but all of the storage fees, all of the shipping costs, all of the handling that is inside there has to be accounted for before we give that warehouse price to our retailer and say, hey, here's your price. I feel really comfortable with it. I'm going to make money. We're still being competitive. We're going to be in line, but we're not going to get ourselves in a situation where after 3 months, I'm bleeding money because I never accounted for all of these things that are in there. So once again, we all got back to the item level P&L, which, for me is a big one, but shipping and all of the individual costs inside of there. That's why you want to do your research. That's why you want to be proactive before you start talking to retailers. Start talking to EDI, start talking to 3PL providers. Make sure they have the capabilities, the capacity, and the to take care of that. And so that is one of those things that doing the work ahead of time will pay its dividends, I promise you. There you have it. We are done with the operations pillar. There's only one pillar next. It's probably the most fun. It's near and dear to me. Sales and marketing. This is when we're going to talk about pushing people and pushing product and getting people to buy things. Some of the more fun stuff. But thank you for sitting through this. This is the stuff that is vitally important to running a business. I think everyone likes the product part of it and everyone likes the selling part of it. Everything in between is what's going to make or break you as a company. So putting the due diligence now to learn this, to getting the right team, to getting the right people, to getting the right manufacturing partners and the 3PL providers, all of that is so vital in scaling at retail. To be ready for retail, all the pieces need to be in place. So we appreciate the time. Go out to get ready for retail. Check out what else we've got. More free stuff. We've got coaching programs. We appreciate the time and look forward to seeing you next time.